Hey, Reg here, and welcome to another episode of Food for Thought.
This is a world premiere. This is a world.
Okay, so recently I posted this video about Gazi Kodzo, who is a fairly militant man of African ancestry who is part of the Uhuru movement, and it's just a very, very forceful, militant black nationalist response to white supremacy. But as a result of posting that video, I had a lot of people kind of coming on and calling me racist, and it was out of hand. And so I just feel like we need to put on the brakes with this, like everybody calling each other racist, and get some clarity around what does it even mean to be racist, and what do we, when we talk about race and racial classifications, what are we talking about? And just to begin with, early on, a race was used as a way to talk about the language that you spoke. So the languages, the different groups who spoke different languages in different parts of the world, their race was, based on the language that they spoke. And then later on, race started to talk about, the tribe, maybe the tribe that you were from, or maybe your nationality. So that term starts to broaden in its scope. And then it wasn't until the 17th century that we get these modern classifications of race that are based on these sort of like physical attributes, and those came out of Europe. And there was something called the scientific revolution that was going on, but there was also this growth of imperialism and colonization out of Europe that led to Europeans becoming very curious about the differences, these like the physical difference, the social and the cultural differences between all of these different people that they were encountering as they were taking over the world. And so it wasn't until the rise of the European Atlantic slave trade that Europeans called on the scientific community to help them justify the subordination of African slaves. And you got the very first classifications being based on continents. And interestingly, I think there were maybe 5 classifications, but the Europaeus, who were the Europeans, they were seen as active, acute, and adventurous, while the Afars, who were the people from the African continent, the black people, were seen as crafty, lazy, and careless. So you have Europeans, white people being seen as adventurous, active, acute, black people being seen as crafty, lazy, careless. All right, so already you have a distinction, a hierarchy that's being created based on race. And then you had later classifications of Negroes that were, always placing Negroes as inferior to whites. And even Thomas Jefferson said that Negroes were inferior primarily based on their intellect, but that they had unnatural sexual appetites. And so these categorizations were labeled as science, they were published, they were widely distributed. These classifications became the folk knowledge that people have, the things that you talk about in your house, the things that you taught your children. They were actually taught in schools. When I was in elementary school, we learned about these classifications. We didn't get all of the details. We weren't told that one of them was necessarily superior and the other was inferior, but we were being taught these same classifications that came with them, if you did further research, came with these positive attributes being attributed to white people, and these negative attributes going to African Americans, so that you can see that our modern racial categories are intended to benefit all white people, all of those who can be identified as white, at the expense of all those who can be identified as black. So there will never really be, if we're basing it on these classifications, unless we completely kind of do away with them and do redefining of them and huge like campaigns, right? Because this took hundreds of years to come to these modern understandings as whites as superior and blacks as inferior, by their definitions, by their racial categories. So all that said, simply by using these categories, white and black, we might be acting, we might be racist. We might be being racist, right? Without even trying, in a very passive way. And it's only through deeply exploring these ideas about race that we can uncover their initial meanings, that their intended meanings, and then start to undo some of that damage, right? So that's it for this video. Like it if you like it, share, comment, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourself. Peace.
And I love myself. The world is a ghetto with big guns and dick inside. I love myself, but it